Hello folks, and welcome to Module 3, Conducting Deeper Research. You've already conducted some research in Modules 1 and 2, but Module 3 gets into how to evaluate your sources to make sure that the sources you have are quality sources and that they're the sorts of the types of sources that you want to have for a research paper for a college class. So there are three graded deliverables for Module 3. 3.2, which is an activity evaluating sources. 3.4, an assignment annotating your sources. It's essentially an annotated bibliography. If you've ever written one of those, they can vary from depending on the discipline that you write them for, but it does a nice job explaining what you need for each entry. And 3.6 is your writing plan. The writing plan builds off of your writing notes, and I'll explain that more in a little bit. So as we go to page 2, evaluating sources is the name of the game on this page. So you want to use scholarly sources for this paper. There's scholarly, non-scholarly, and academic trade sources. It defines scholarly sources right here. Scholarly sources are books, periodicals, and reference materials that are written for the purpose of supporting and advancing scholarly research rather than general interest in a topic. That last part is key. That last part is key. It's for advancing scholarly research rather than general interest in the topic. So People Magazine, not scholarly. An important factor in scholarly articles, scholarly journals, is the peer review. So experts will write an article, but then it's peer reviewed, which means that the article then goes out to other experts in the field, and those experts will weigh in on the article, provide feedback, and then the author decides what to do with that feedback when he or she is revising their article, which they will then publish. It is at that point been peer reviewed. Academic presses and other organizations also use peer review process. Academic presses are presses that are either situated on college or university campuses, or they're affiliated, even if they aren't directly on the premises. And so they use the peer review process. So books from academic presses can be scholarly as well. So if you use peer-reviewed sources, you can rest assured that some of the critique work has been done for you. However, you still need to use your own judgment to determine the credibility of your sources. Down here are some indicators of scholarly sources and non-scholarly sources. Scholarly nonfiction, they contain facts and research on the topic. They usually list the credentials of the author. It's important when it comes to scholarly sources that the person who is writing writes with some sort of authority. And so they'll put their credentials after their name to indicate the highest degree achieved, to basically say, hey, I'm somebody who you should listen to whom you should listen on this topic. Usually they'll have footnotes or use citations to indicate what ideas should be attributed to other authors and where the reader can find more information on the topic. They'll usually present new research or new ideas about older research, and usually printed by university presses or in scholarly journals. Now, so scholarly and non-scholarly are two ways of thinking about your sources, and you want to use scholarly. But sources are also broken down by a different type, and that's primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary sources, if you click the arrow, they are the work itself. They are as close to the work that you are studying as possible. A transcribed speech, a letter from a historical figure. Primary sources include, for example, historical documents. Secondary sources, those are the ones you're going to be using for your paper. They summarize, evaluate, or otherwise inform you about primary sources. Secondary sources include, for example, articles that evaluate a politician's role in a war and articles that summarize and interpret scientific research data. Tertiary sources are your like textbooks, encyclopedias. For this paper, you are very it's not likely that you'll use a tertiary source, but regardless of the paper or the course, unless an instructor specifically says use tertiary sources, they're really kind of they're because they contain so much information. They're a compilation of research. It's usually quick hits, and so there isn't a depth to the information. And when it comes to research at the college level, you really want to have depth to topics when you're digging into them and researching them. And then finally, it's broken down. The sources are broken down by types, meaning the form they take: books, periodicals, references, news sources, audiovisual, and websites. If you click on the link, it'll give you some very um, succinct but good information on each of these source types. So, but evaluating credibility when writing your paper, the CRAP test, yes, it is an acronym. It stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. Essentially, you put your if you put your source through this CRAP test, and it scores a 35 or higher, then you probably have a credible source. That's a source that you should consider sticking with. So the currency of your source is that you should use sources that are timely. Your research should be it should be as up to date as possible. You want the latest information, and you don't want to use dated research, at least for the topics that you guys are going to be exploring in this class. Relevance, you should use sources that are relevant to your project. So while it might be on your topic, if it's not relevant to the particular slice of the topic that you're going to be focusing on, it's not probably the best source for this paper. Authority, you should use sources that are authored by authoritative sources. We talked about that. Well, I talked about that briefly when talking about the author putting PhD at the end of his name to adding the credentials in there. That's to establish authority. Accuracy, you should use sources that provide accurate information. Obviously, you don't want to use sources that provide inaccurate information because, well, that's not good. And purpose, you should consider the purpose of the source you cite. The purpose of the source you cite, meaning, is it biased or is it objective? Usually you want to go with sources that are more objective because they aren't out to achieve a particular end. They're presenting the facts as objectively as possible. So you want to consider purpose. I mean, unless you're writing a research paper on biased opinions, then you'd want to pick some sources that are biased. But for this paper, I would go for I would aim for objectivity. For me, I would want sources that were as objective as possible, give me facts that I would then use to support my position. So you guys are going to be putting the you're going to put a source through the CRAP test. It can be one that you've already found, or you can create a new keyword search and find a new source. If you aren't really thrilled with the ones you've found so far, or if you have recently switched your topic, now is a good chance to look for a source. And so you're going to read the source, obviously, put it through the CRAP test by using the worksheet. And it says that if the total for the source is 35 points or higher, it is a good indication that it is credible. So once you've found a credible source, this is the actual assignment. You want to answer these 4 questions and type them into this box here. So so what are the total points the source earned on the test? Where did it earn the most points? How did it earn the points? Where did it earn the least? Why did it lose points? And how will the source help support the main argument? You're going to write one substantive paragraph that addresses all of these on a source that you put through the CRAP test that you determine to be credible. And then you'll hit submit and you're good. So that is the first assignment, graded assignment for Module 3. Now, reading, research notes. Now that you've gathered some sources and tested their credibility, it's time to gather notes from your sources. You're going to need 3 scholarly sources for this paper in the end. So you want to make sure that you hit that while you're conducting research, looking for credible sources for the to put through the CRAP test. Because on the final assignment for Module 3, it's going to ask you to write annotated and basically create an annotated bibliography, and you have to have entries for 3 different sources. Now, so the first thing they do in this section here, though, is they give you some ideas about note taking. You can easily take notes by creating a double entry notebook. A double entry notebook is when you draw a line down the middle of the page to create 2 columns. On the one side, you write down things that struck you from what you're reading, and on the other side, you write why, what about it struck you, or did it cause you to have a question? If so, write the question down. Although with questions, you always want to try to answer them by the time you're finished reading the paper or the article as much as possible. It's better than leaving them dangling. But if you can't, that's fine. But ideally, anyways, the purpose of them talking about this double entry column is one of the things that you're going to have to do for your annotated bibliography entries is create a summary. And so taking notes is a great way to have something to go back to create, to draw from to create the summary. You're also going to have to evaluate, and so if you haven't put it through the CRAP test already in the previous activity, you'll want to put it through the CRAP test. And then finally, relevance. You want to consider how relevant is it to your paper and your topic and question. So you taking notes, especially this style of note taking. Here's an example of it. It'll set you up for being able to write these entries, hopefully fairly easily, or at least not with great difficulty. Hopefully. So there are three stages of an annotated bibliography entry. Note 3 stages of an annotated bibliography entry. You are going to have an annotated bibliography entry for each of your sources, at least 3 sources. So there's 3 stages for each source. So don't think that it's just 3 paragraphs. So for each source, you want to summarize. You want to assess credibility, and you want to assess relevance. So click on these tabs, and it gives you a wonderful little overview of what it is that they're talking about. But in addition to that, they also provide a Mad Libs style fill-in here. So by filling in the blanks, you will be completing this step of this entry for the annotated bibliography. And there is something for each of these. There's one right here for credibility, and as far as summarizing goes, for the summary right there, they provide it. If you want to, if you don't want to use these exact lines, as long as you get at what these lines are trying to get you to get at, you're good. So all that is uh, consider that like resources that's going to help you. And then the annotating your sources, though, the actual assignment is here. Here's the overview of the assignment. Here's the prompt. And note down here, you will need to follow the steps below 3 times for your 3 different sources. Again, you will need to follow the steps below 3 times for your 3 different sources. So before you begin, make sure you have these items. And then again, the little Mad Libs templates. They aren't really Mad Libs, but I'm calling them Mad Libs, obviously. But they copy them over to here, so it allows you to see all the different steps that you're going to need to do for each entry. Guidelines for submission. Your annotations must include at least 3 sources. Save your work in a Word document with double spacing, 12-point times New Roman font, and 1-inch margins. Then check your writing for errors. Once you have proofread your document, submit it via Module 3-2 annotating your sources assignment link in Brightspace. Down here is the rubric. If you are looking for that 100 proficient, you want to make sure that you are hitting these indicators. Right, so there is one more assignment for Module 3. It's after this. So this video, I like this video. It gets at how to argue well, how to create an airtight argument. I think of persuasive writing like I do proofs in geometry. That as best as I can, I want to have a major premise, minor premise that people will agree with, and then therefore they can not, but help to draw the conclusion that I'm even hoping that they'll draw. So it's not all that long. It's by the New Hampton School, so check that out. And then this is the final assignment for this module. So for 2-2, for assignment back in Module 2, writing notes, you created writing notes that helped you to consider the following critical elements. All these right here, and again, if you just hover over them, it'll provide you with a definition of each, or, well, I should say a definition and some things to prompt you as to what you might write about for each. Now it's time to revisit your writing notes and revise your responses to produce a complete polished document that addresses all of the above elements. By reconsidering your responses from your writing notes, you will construct a writing plan. This process will allow you to develop a potential structure for effectively persuading readers to agree with your argument. Essentially, this is going to provide the foundation for your paper. So I would really make sure that you flesh out your responses, meaning develop them, unpack your ideas, and don't shortchange this assignment because it's only going to be a disservice to future you. So future you will thank you if you give this assignment your all. So as you work on the writing plan, remember to refer to the assignment guidelines and rubrics below to make sure you're fulfilling each aspect of the assignment. Here's the overview, and then here's the prompt. Read those very closely, and then specifically the following critical elements must be addressed. So for your writing plan, use this writing plan as a way to gather your thoughts and determine your strategies for your persuasive essay. This process will allow you to develop a potential structure for effectively communicating and supporting your claim. This plan will be helpful in keeping your thought process on track when you begin writing and revising your essay. Now, some people were a little confused with the writing notes, so I just want to point out something to make sure that that doesn't happen here. Each response should be one fully developed paragraph in length. So your response to each of these should be one developed paragraph in length. I encourage you to use transitions between paragraphs. If for no other reason, then it's good practice. A lot of you aren't using them all that consistently between paragraphs, and so your writing will jump between paragraphs, and you want it to be fluid. So I encourage you to consider, instead of writing just like instead of making them islands, try to link them together, some fluidity. It'll only help you in the long run, because on your rough draft and final draft, you definitely want to sharpen your transitions. Then guidelines for submission: Word document, double spacing, 12-point Times New Roman font, 1-inch margins. Then check your writing for errors. Once you have proofread it, submit it via Module 3, 3-6 Writing Plan Assignment, link in Brightspace. And then down here is the rubric. You'll notice that exemplary is now emerged as a category, but it is not filled in for most things, except, as I told some of you, exemplary for articulation and response. Submission is free of errors related to citation, grammar, spelling, syntax, and so they have added something in under the exemplary, and that is a they set the bar high there. So do your best to hit that. It's not easy, but I have faith you can do it. So that is Module 3. Please do not hesitate to let me know if you have any questions about any of the assignments or anything else pertaining to our course.